everyone.
Okay.
Welcome. Let's go ahead and get started. If you can hear us, chat box. All right. I'm Hayden Lee, and I'm here with my colleagues Nick Soper, and we are so excited to be here. Each of us, in our own way, we help lives, and together we and certified academic life coach for teenagers, which is myself, an independent college counselor, which is Nick, and a licensed therapist. And we've come together to create unique content just for you as the parent of a teenager. So what we're doing is we're addressing the changing reality of what it takes to be a young adult in today's world. And we want to help you, teen, to the next level with knowledge, tips, and tools that help you and your 12th grader. So today we're going to be giving you some tips to surviving the most stressful time of the fall. So please type yes if you or your teen is experiencing any stress about school right now. Okay, so just a couple logistical things that we're going to cover right now. You're welcome to chat with us in the chat box. And if you're having some audio or video problems, please let us know in the chat box. And you might see a few polls pop up in our webinar, and please feel free to participate in our poll and make your voice be heard. Sometimes the poll might pop up a minute before we ask you to take it, so just wait for our introduction to ask you to take the poll. And at the end, we're having a Q&A, so please stick around for that, and we will try to answer everyone's questions. And make sure to have a way to take some notes. You know, we will have a give you a way to access our slides from today, but there will be a few great opportunities for you to write down some quick ideas. So grab a piece of pen and a paper and make sure to take some notes. And today we're going to cover three main topics. Christine is going to cover 4 ways for parents and students to safeguard against stress. Hayden, myself, I'm going to talk about how to stay motivated all semester long. And Nick is going to create an application roadmap for the college applications. So before we jump into the material, we just want to do some quick introductions. I'm having some video difficulties. I will just be audio today. My name is Hayden Lee, and I'm a certified academic life coach for teenagers. And what I do is I have specialized coaching to help teenagers who want to step it up but not sure how to get there. So I help them with tools on time management, stress management, communication with their teachers, motivation, and really some tools on just how to be more confident as a student. So that is me. Let me turn it over to Nick so he can introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nick Soper. I am an independent education consultant, and I specialize in working with creative, artistic, and otherwise out-of-the-box sorts of students as they start the entirety of the college application process, all the way from researching schools, finding out about programs, and really discovering what the options are out there all the way through the application process, making sure that every step is covered and no opportunity is missed, all the way through the final decision and getting connected to that college of your dreams. And I'm going to pass it over to Christine.
That's me. Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to see everybody that's here today on a Saturday morning. It's great. I'm Christine, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I specialize in anxiety treatment. So I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about stress today. I also specialize in working with teenagers. So that's everything from really severe stress and anxiety to kind of the more mild stuff that might get in the way of things like school. They also help parents and teens connect and communicate with one another. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today too. And I'm going to jump right into this content. So please feel free to type questions if you have them in the chat box. I will have a poll, but right now let me just share my screen again so we can get right into what we're talking about today. All right, Hayden got a chance to share what each of us is going to cover. First, I'm going to talk with you a little bit about how to safeguard yourself against stress. And I've got 4 kind of general tools to cover, and I'll give you some examples with each of them. First, I want to talk to you about one of my favorite keys to stress reduction. And this is actually a key to stress prevention too. Next, I want to help you look a little bit at what stress looks like for you, because we talk about it kind of in a general way, but it works for everybody a little bit differently. So if you know a little bit of what to look out for yourself, it can save you a lot of time and stress. Next, I want to talk with you about how clear your expectations are, and if you have any willingness to experiment with different things that really might make a difference for you when it comes to creating useful habits that reduce stress. And finally, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about empathy and how it relates to stress, and give you some tips on it, defining your roles for yourself and for your student. So let's jump into that. So did you know that stress is a symptom of a communication problem, and that improving communication tools and practices will really significantly reduce both chronic stress over time and short-term periodic stressful experiences? Well, I think that you may know that you and your student might struggle with communication, but really let's break that down and see what that means. Your student may struggle with talking with others or having clear communication with you, but also for you and for your student, you may have a difficulty communicating with yourself about what your expectations really are of yourself, or just not have a very good connection with knowing and recognizing your physical experience of emotions and your mind's understanding of it. I know that this happens to a lot of us when we're kind of not wanting to face some of what we're feeling, or really just rushing through life too quickly to attend to these feelings. It's kind of ironic when we're sort of busy, we really need to be careful because stress can get in our way, but sometimes we get too busy to notice what stress might be doing to our body. And practicing communicating with ourselves and paying attention to the communication signals that our body is giving to us can make a huge difference. So basically, the good news with all of this is that healthier communication can make a huge, huge difference when it comes to reducing stress and having a lasting solution for preventing stress. So I just want to make note of that. One of the reasons that the teen years are stereotypically kind of characterized by being stressful is because there are a lot of struggles with communication between teens and their parents. So even though it's common, I just want to mention that it's not really necessary, and it's not ideal for difficult communication to happen between a parent and their teenager. And there are a lot of changes when it comes to communicating with a teenager. For example, your student is now a lot more capable of making decisions for themselves. So figuring out how to delegate tasks and be clear on your roles and how to approach problems together, even if you might have differing perspectives, is a challenge for parents and teenagers. But just to acknowledge that it's a challenge, but that communication skills are so key, and they can really help reduce the stress that might happen. If you kind of know that it's there and almost embrace it, it can make a big difference, knowing that the communication is a huge piece of what keeps that tension out of your relationship with your teenager. But before I get into some ways to delegate tasks and to kind of be clear on those roles, I really do want you to think about how you and your family experience stress. So here are some questions I've got for you to ask for yourself. What's my family like when they're under pressure? Because one person in the family having some stress, even if other people aren't fully aware of it, it affects the whole family system in some way or another. Someone might take on a different role. Someone might struggle with their usual role if someone in the family is under stress. How are you like under pressure? What do you know about yourself? What am I really like when there's a pressured situation? And then what's my student like when they're under pressure? Or if you are a student who's joining us, which I love when we get a lot of students coming and asking questions, make an observation about your parent. It's not your job to take care of your parent when they're stressed or to know what to do necessarily, but just to be able to recognize that everybody's human and there may be some signs to know when your parent's kind of feeling stressed. So to be able to have a plan of how to, acknowledge that and respond the way that you really want to. So I actually have a poll about stress and how it shows up for you, and it's anonymous. So if you do want to type in the chat privately and let us know a little bit about what stress is like for you, feel free. But the poll is anonymous, so that should pop up in a minute. But what I'd love for you to share is what you know about yourself and stress. What do you tend to do when you're stressed? Are you really great at handling a lot, but kind of at the cost of getting enough rest and really being healthy? Maybe you tend to procrastinate when you're feeling stress. That kind of leads to a cycle of having a lot of stress right before a deadline, and it can make it so that you don't feel like you're able to do as well. Again, it kind of sacrifices some relaxation that might be possible if there wasn't so much a cycle of stress. What about, do you tend to worry about the things that you can't control when you're stressed? Sometimes, again, sort of ironic the way that stress works. Instead of focusing on what we can do, we worry a lot about the things that we can't. Maybe you tend to compare when you're feeling stressed. Maybe you're focusing on your students' behavior instead of your own. Or maybe you're focusing on other people that have it better or worse than you. Just encourage you to think about what strengths you have when it comes to how you manage stress, as well as the things that are the red flags that you see in yourself or your student when it comes to how you respond to stress, just so you can start to create a game plan for maybe how to navigate that better. Especially when something's important, again, sometimes we don't really focus on those communication tools and the things that really help. But really, there's always something that can cause stress, and if we always wait until the test is over, or wait until application time is over, wait for these things to be done before we relax, there's always going to be something to wait for. And of course, there's a lot to do, and you don't want your student to be slacking off. You really want her to be making good choices, I'm sure. But even more importantly, I want to encourage you to be thinking about what is she doing now that's practicing helping her cope with pressure and stress that is coming down the line. Respond to pressure in a way that's conscious. We don't sacrifice all of the things that keep us healthy just because there's something that could potentially be stressful. So another way that I've got for you to help yourself navigate stress is to be willing to think about what works for you. So does it help you to do a little bit toward a task every day, or do you like to have certain days where you do more and certain days where you do less, and maybe have things that are days that are totally rest days for you? Everybody might do it a little bit differently. Maybe you really like getting up early. Maybe that doesn't really help you and you're tired the whole rest of the day. Think about maybe things that you know might be useful but you haven't really tried yet, or think about things that have helped you in the past. And I'd love for you at this point to type something in the chat box. Think about what's something that you know works and helps you reduce stress, especially if maybe you're thinking of something that you forget to do lately, or things that you usually keep up with that we forget even though it's helpful, right? So take a minute to type that in the chat box for me, because I'd love to see what you do to help reduce stress. So next I want to talk to you a little bit about having clear expectations about what you expect from your student. And this is somewhat straightforward, but it really will help you be organized, because you might not realize it. You might be expecting your student to be doing everything in one day without realizing it, because you're putting the pressure of the whole project on every time you mention it. So, okay, when do you really want to be having reminders for this? Do you have examples of what you really expect to have yourself accomplish? Are you able to write it down and agree with your student about what you want them to accomplish? Also, this is kind of a great time to offer some extra love by communicating not with your words toward your student, like maybe doing one of their chores that they usually do quietly, like doing the dishes when you know she's up late working on that college essay. Just giving her that little bit of encouragement because you know that she's working so hard, rather than just focusing on what you're worried she might not get done. And kind of a basic guideline is that you want to make sure that you're not doing any of this for your student. It's not just harmful because it creates some stress, but it also keeps your student in that chaotic period before we learn something, right? So if going through the process of actually having to put in the work and get something done, that chaos gets resolved. Your student will actually be able to go through the process of preparing for life after high school. And you want her to feel equipped to handle other things in the future. So finally, I want to talk a little bit quickly about empathy. It's one of the most useful tools that helps reduce stress. One of the reasons for that is that it reduces your resentment for somebody else. and it kind of allows you to support somebody else even if you don't fully understand. It doesn't mean that you have to know everything that they're feeling or have to have gone through the same situation. Sometimes saying, I understand, doesn't even make someone feel understood so much as just actually sitting and listening to them. So having some empathy for what they're experiencing. So truly listening to them. And then acknowledging unique roles. So as a student, you might want to have empathy for other students. Even if you feel like you're the only one who's worried and overwhelmed right now, you're probably not. Other people probably are struggling with this too, and you don't have to do this by yourself. So you can be make sure that you're making your own decisions for this. You're not listening to what your friends think you should do, or even what your parents think you should do all the time as far as these big life choices. But get support so that you can talk through and make decisions that you want to make. And even if you feel like you're the only one who cares about this college stuff, you're not. You can connect with other people who will really support you. And for you parents, it's really helpful to solidify your role and your way to support your student by making sure that the questions that you ask are constructive, that you're not making very many assumptions about what your student wants and what she thinks, because even though it can take a little bit of time to sort through that, it's really worth helping your student think about, what do I really want from this whole process? What am I really hoping for in my future? And then you don't have to think through it all yourself of what your student needs or what he's asking for from you. He's probably trying to tell you, even if it's not in the clearest way. So notice what you think your student might really be needing from you or from himself. So this is a great guideline, telling myself I don't need to rescue my student. I don't need to stop the stress from happening. I can't rescue them from it. I can support them through it. It's hard to do. You've got to manage your own anxiety, but it really makes a big difference. And then this one might seem obvious, but we all struggle with this. We don't have to stress for somebody else. If your student is stressed, getting stressed is not a way of showing empathy. You don't have to be stressing for them to show them that you care. You can instead help seek solutions and support for your student. So if, for an example, if you're really working hard to make things happen or make things go the right way, you might be missing out on doing the things that you do need to be doing because you can't ensure that everything is working perfectly for your student. You don't need to rescue them. You can help take each task step by step without making assumptions or planning for the worst, but just using those constructive questions and having an attitude about seeking those solutions. So let's recap real quick. Hopefully this slide is really useful to look through everything that we've just talked about before we get into some awesome examples and awesome guidance from Hayden and from Nick. I just want you to think about and remember that healthy communication reduces and protects against stress. So think about how you're communicating your intentions and your expectations to yourself. Get to know your stress and beat your stress. It's not everybody else's. It's not the same for everybody. You don't have to feel at a loss. You can get to know what stress looks like for you. And then be willing to find out what works for you. Be willing to experiment. Give something a real try for a week. The worst that can happen is it's not the perfect solution for you. Just to kind of be in that mindset of trying something and finding something. And finally, use empathy and respect and define those roles as a parent and student. Think about what your student needs to do and what you need to do as a parent, and keep it clear. Don't let it get confusing and start taking on things that really they should be doing, or putting stress on them if it's you that's kind of stressed and maybe they're actually doing pretty okay. Wouldn't that be cool? All right, well, I will turn it over now to Hayden. Thank you so much for letting me share all of this with you. I hope that it was very useful. All right, Hayden.
All right, Christina, thank you so much. That was awesome, Christina. If you could actually keep your slides up, that would be great. So let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to be talking about just motivation and how to stay motivated for the rest of the semester, but it really starts with the mid-semester check-in. As we approach the midway point, it's really good just to check in, like Christine was saying, is like, where is our stress level right now, and where is our motivation level right now? So the next question is really remind yourself what you want this semester. You know, this is for all students, is to remind themselves at the beginning of the year, remember how we were all pretty motivated and we all were optimistic about what we wanted this year. Let's check in with that. Remind ourselves, what is it that we want this semester? Next, is to really ask ourselves, who do I need to be? Is it main, or is Christine the screen? Yeah. Sorry about the technical visual that have Hayden's audio. This is the first time we've done this, so. All right. So I'm going to keep on going. So ask ourselves, who we need to be in order to make that outcome easier to achieve. So the next thing in the mid-semester check-in is the next point here is why do you want it? Remind yourself why you want to achieve what you want. And then next is, of course, asking yourself how you can make it happen. So it's really just doing a quick check-in and then a reality check. This is really important for teenagers to really ask themselves an honest question if their actions really are aligning with who they want to be. Remember what we're trying to achieve and ask yourselves if we're actually doing it and to be honest with ourselves. But the good news is let's plan for what we want and go for it, because it's not too late. A lot of times students may think that it's the middle of the semester and that there's no way to get things up, and that's not true. We have to keep a positive attitude and really plan for what we want. In fact, Sheila was saying in the sidebar that one way she helps reduce stress is to actually plan what she needs to do. So the next slide will tell us exactly, what we can do to plan for what we want. Next slide here is, hello, Christine. Oh, there we go. So I just wanted to remind ourselves of this chart. This is what happens when we actually plan for what we want and we motivate towards the good stuff. As you can see, you create a plan, you stick to the plan, and then you can celebrate. So if you actually move towards what you want and plan for what you want, as it's a lot more consistent, and our stress levels and our effort levels, our happiness levels, and our sanity levels stays pretty consistent and actually starts to move towards the goal. So next slide here. So I want us to address the mid-semester slump, which is a real thing. The mid-semester slump is, as we reach the midway point, it's perfectly normal to maybe lose some steam and get discouraged and lose motivation. We might start second-guessing ourselves and be pessimistic or skeptical and start losing focus. I call those the symptoms of the mid-semester slump. So I want to take a quick little poll here. Does your teen, or maybe even you as the parent, have any symptoms of the mid-semester slump? So if we could launch the poll there, Nick, the poll is going to ask us yes or no if your teenager has any symptoms of the mid-semester slump. Yeah, so let's just take that poll there. So I want to, let me see. Since I'm actually not in full screen, I can see the results of the poll, which 100% of our attendees are saying that either them or their teen are showing some symptoms of the mid-semester slump. So let's look at this motivation cycle. One of the best ways to get over the mid-semester slump is to be aware of where we are in the motivation cycle. So I just want to take you guys through this really fast. So at the top of the cycle is engaged. So engaged is when we feel motivated, when we feel confident, when we just have a plan and we know what to do and when to do it. That's when we feel at our best. That is when we just wake up in the morning and we just feel super pumped and we know what to do. But then what happens is there's resistance. So resistance is when, we encounter something challenging, or when we're asked to step outside of our comfort zone, or when we encounter in school, maybe we get into material that is not very familiar, or we get to a class that we're not very strong in. That happens a lot around the midway point in the semester, because at the beginning of the semester, things might not be as rigorous. It might be reviewing a lot of material, and you feel engaged and super motivated because things are going well. But then resistance happens when, we're in a new chapter, or this is new material that I haven't learned before, or maybe it's the first time you're taking an AP class, and it's getting harder and faster. Then you resist. Then, when you encounter this challenge, you get to disengaged. So disengaged is when you actually lose the motivation, and then you feel kind of like you want to give up, and you're just not motivated, and you're in a slump, and you just kind of feel really, I call it in a lull, or I call it you feel kind of blah. But then the trick is to recover. To recover is to find a way or a tool to get back to feeling motivated, so then you can get out of disengaged, get to recovery, and get back to feeling engaged again. You see, the trick is it's not to avoid resistance and disengaged, because you can't prevent that from happening, but it's finding a way to recover back to engaged faster. So next slide, please. So yeah, so the motivation cycle. So during the mid-semester check-in, let's really have ourselves ask ourselves, what stage are you in right now? You know, are you in engaged, resistance, disengaged, or recovery? And how do you know when you're engaged? Right? How do you feel when you're actually at the top of that motivation cycle? And let's be honest with ourselves and ask us, what is our relationship with resistance? And how do you know when you're in resistance? What that means is when you do encounter a challenge, or when you do encounter something that's not easy for you, how do you usually act? You know, what is your usual relationship? Do you ignore it? Do you shut down? Do you get defensive? And then how do you know when you're in that stage? Next slide, please. So and then how do you know when you're disengaged? You know, a lot of students in the midway point, they start getting disengaged, but how do you know? You know, how do you feel when you're disengaged? You get defensive, you get snappy with your parents and your teachers. And the most important part then is, what can you do to get into the recovery? And recovery is getting back to feeling motivated and super engaged again. And here's one tool that I can help you guys with to get back to engaged, is an anchor. So an anchor is something that I teach all of my students. An anchor is a positive mental structure to help us get back on track. You see, so everyone in the room right now, let's create an anchor together. So let's think of a time when you were at your best. You know, think of a time when you just felt super proud of yourself, super accomplished, and super motivated. And I'll share with you guys one of my anchors. One of my anchors is when I was doing a TED Talk for youth at Palisades High School here in Los Angeles, and I was doing this talk helping teenagers really define success for themselves. That is one of my anchors, because I just felt very proud and I felt confident, which goes to the next question, who were you being at that time? So think of your anchor of a time when you just felt on top of the world and you were at your best. Who were you being at that time? You know, so like I was saying, when I was doing that TED Talk in front of these teenagers, I felt confident and I felt proud and I just felt very inspirational to these young people. So think about, for your anchor, think about who you were being then. And now ask this question. If you were to access those qualities again, what's possible? So that's how an anchor helps you recover. So if I were to access my qualities again let's go back, sorry. If I were to access my qualities again to just feel super confident and super inspirational, you know, what actions would that lead to? It'd probably lead to me making the plan of my next step, not second-guessing myself, and just to follow through with it. You know, so that is how I would get from disengaged back to engaged. So yeah, I mean, I think that is a great tool, and I want all of you to create your anchor and really think about how you can get back from disengaged to engaged faster and faster. So I definitely think this can apply to all teenagers right now as they try to get over the mid-semester slump. All right, so that is so now it's actually time. I'm going to turn over to Nick, and I think Nick has his own slides, and Nick is going to talk about how you can also get over the mid-semester slump by focusing on some specific college action steps. All right, Nick, take over.
Forgot. Gotta unmute my microphone first. All right, everybody. It is time to take this directly over to the college application process. So I'm going to go back into full screen. And it is time at this point in the season, if it hasn't already happened, to really break it all down and make sure that you are able to go step by step, one foot in front of the next, into finishing up and seeing all the way through these college applications. So I'm actually going to start out with a poll on this one. How many people have in place a means of kind of tracking the whole process? Hopefully someone can launch that poll for me. Great. Awesome. How many of you have gotten organized, and you really know all the way through the very end of everything that you're doing, what needs to be done, when it's going to get done realistically, and exactly what the requirements are. So you know, and so that there's no doubt about what can fit where. And I'm going to talk a little bit, for those of you who have not really gotten to flesh that out at this point, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that you, or most of the things actually, that you want to be able to capture, and a tool that has been absolutely invaluable to me over the years for being able to manage this whole process. First thing is the deadlines. Deadlines. So, as I'm sure everybody here knows, the early action and early decision deadlines are coming right up. November 1st and 15th are two of the most popular ones. For those of you maybe applying to some technical schools, Georgia Tech, for example, the deadline for early action was this past week on October 15th, which is ludicrous to me, but that seems to be the trend more and more. Regular decision deadlines generally start around the first of the year and extend toward March, but most of them fall on January 1st or 15th. Sometimes on February 1st. My strong inclination is to try to be finished before then, ideally be finished before the end of winter break, so you can actually enjoy some of winter break, and so that you can go into second semester really feeling like there is nothing distracting you from finishing strong, or at least being able to combat the senioritis from setting in too early. The other thing about deadlines is that many of those requirements for talent-based programs fall between November and December. If you have a student who is going to be auditioning, for example, or who needs to submit materials for what they call a pre-screen via SlideRoom or Decision Desk or one of those portals, maybe some media or a recorded interview or an audio recording or images, a lot of times those have to go in a little bit earlier before you move on to the next stage of that specific application process. So make sure that you're on the lookout for those now, because they are coming right up. Last chance for testing, test dates, SAT and subject tests. Last two coming up are November 7th and December 5th. There's one more in January, I think January 24th if I remember right, but often that's a little bit too late in the cycle for most of these application deadlines. So you want to jump on it now if you need to take one more crack at it. The ACT, October 24th and December 12th. Also one coming up in February, way too late for anything. And remember that scores become available roughly 3 weeks later. So, as you'll see when we jump forward to the home stretch tool that I'll be sharing, this is an important thing to include on the calendar, because that's the time that you can go to your College Board account, you can go to your ACT student account, and make sure to submit your official scores to the schools to which you will be applying, to the ones that require them. So let's talk about this home stretch. This is a document that I like to create for all of my students. I do it a little bit differently now that I am using a different piece of technology, but really anyone can create this tool so that you have an easy time of managing the whole process, and you have a system of accountability that if you don't have anyone else like a counselor working with your student, then at least you have an opportunity to get all of the major dates and deadlines out onto the table where everyone can see them, and you can come to agreement on what is going to happen when. And it's a little bit more possible for your teenager to have support because you are looped into the process. So the place that I like to start is with an ideal end by date. When do you want to be finished? Start there. Start anywhere. Don't really worry about deadlines as of yet, because that's the next thing that you're gonna layer in. Get the final application deadlines and other major events that are going on in your life. Are you traveling? Do you have to take the ACT or the SAT? Do you have big projects due in school? Do you have competitions coming up for sports? Or are you in tech rehearsals for a production? There are all sorts of things that would really take away the focus from college applications, so you want to make sure that they are in the calendar and in the timeline, and you are working around those sorts of things, so you're not creating unrealistic expectations of yourself or your student. And then you go and you break down those tasks, and we are going to call back to an amazing tool that Hayden shared, I think, a couple of months ago, called those well-designed actions. This has been life-changing for me in my practice. I love talking about well-designed actions with my students as kind of a means for making goals measurable and making them bite-sized and accomplishable enough that it's way easier to maintain a sense of forward momentum. So if we're thinking about application tasks as WDAs, some of the main things with pretty much any school, and now obviously it's going to vary school to school as it always does, but generally letters of recommendation, securing those, making sure to put in the request for those letters of recommendation either through Naviance or through the Common Application or through the school's application site, or if the school does it old school, you basically have to print out the page and hand it to your writers of those letters of recommendation, making sure that those get done in the way that they need to get done, and that your recommenders have all the materials that they need to write a really personal, in-depth letter like we talked about last month. Secondary school reports and the counselor letter of rec usually go hand in hand. It's the school counselor or the college counselor that handles the secondary school report, which is what gives colleges context about the grading scale, about rankings, about the courses that are available at the school. Really, really important for holistic admissions. Transcript requests. Official transcript requests usually need to be made at the college center for each of the schools that you're going to be sending to. There's often a fee that's associated with that, just a couple of bucks, to make sure that they are sealed and sent officially. And then score reporting, like we talked about for ACTs, SATs, and subject tests, as well as APs. Writing pieces. So when you're looking at these writing pieces and breaking them down into more manageable tasks, I like to think about them in 4 phases: drafting, getting feedback, revising, and polishing. And if possible, I like to build in about a week for each of those, although you can always condense them if there is the time and the need to be able to do that if you are trying to make that ideal deadline. Then supplemental items, interviews, portfolios, auditions, and you have to break those. They all kind of have their own special steps to break them into their component tasks. Reaching out to the school, putting in the call or the request for the interview, scheduling the interview, and then actually preparing, showing up. For example, portfolios, going to portfolio day, getting feedback from your teacher, spending a little bit of extra studio time to finish those 2 pieces that you wanted to include in your portfolio, etc. So you got to make sure that you are dotting those I's and crossing those T's. And this is just a little quick demonstration of how this tool works, or how I would go about doing it. So I create a document that goes week by week. We're going to say that Rena here has, she's finished her early applications, and now we're looking at November and December. And she'd like to finish up by the end of December, so she can go into second semester fresh. So here's the first thing, like we discussed. We will layer in the final SAT that she's going to be taking on November 7th for that week ending in November 8th. And we will put in the dates by which she's going to submit these other applications based on when their deadlines are. Now, I am very, very fastidious about making sure that students target dates that are before the actual deadlines, just in case there are any snafus. You just want to make sure that you have a little bit of extra leg room to make sure you can address any problems that there might have been with media, or if a school didn't receive everything they needed. And then we also have in there ordering the SATs from the College Board a few weeks after taking that final test. So we're going to break things down for USC. Here is the first piece of writing. Say she is applying to the film program at USC, and she has a cinema personal statement. It's 1,000 words. I like to include that in there because it gives a better idea of the scope of the whole assignment. So if we're going to break it into those phases, for us to be able to make that deadline, if she hasn't really started it by now, she's going to have to draft it that last week of October, leading up to November 1st. Then early on the following week, she will take it in to her film teacher and get him to do a little bit of coverage on it, and give some feedback that she can then go in and really rework and finalize. So we're combining the revising and the polishing phase in that week ending on November 15th. And then basically it gives a little bit more time to dot I's and cross T's as she gets ready to submit the following week. Now, there are many other assignments that need to be layered in. So here is what it looks like is after we have broken down all the tasks for sending in that USC application to the film school. So she has to select footage. The next week, we're going to actually add in on top of that SAT. So that's going to be a little bit crazy, and we want to make it light. So getting feedback easy doesn't create a whole lot of mess for her. Editing out 5 minutes of footage, no problem. She can do that during a free period. And reformatting her resume, she already has a creative resume that's going to work for this, and it's going to be pretty light lifting to be able to make it conform to the USC standards. So no problem, we can put those in there while she's getting geared up to take that test. The following week, we're going to get back into doing a little bit more work. She's got to do some of the technical aspects of managing that footage, and she's got to go in and select dialogue from her short film script. But really, the focus of this week so far is revising that written statement, because that's a big, big, big deal for that school. Okay. Now we're going to layer in the rest of the requirements for these, basically just these two schools right now, so we can see them without you guys getting overwhelmed. So we've also layered in under that first week, fleshing out the draft for the second UC prompt. Then the next week, getting feedback from her English teacher. And then meeting with the college counselor at school to take care of some of the things in the common application that Rena has some questions about, specifically the activity section. He can go over that with her and just help her clarify the descriptions of the things that she does. And then there we go. We had to shuffle a few things around and move them to the week of the 22nd just to make them all work and make them feel balanced. But we're in pretty good shape. Here we go, last step with this. This is really important, and I think a lot of students will kind of, after they've made it through the week, they'll just sort of let some of those things go and not really go back and look at it. I think it's really important to go through and literally cross off the list, however you want to do that. So at this point, you're striking out the things that have been done accordingly, and I highlight the things that have not been done, and then we reschedule. And after everything is mapped out, I forgot to mention this actually on the last slide, but after you have everything mapped out by week, it's time to pull out the old calendar or get on Google Calendar or iCal or whatever and actually slot things into specific days. It's actually way less overwhelming when you can see them mapped out throughout the course of the week and not just stacked on in a list like this. But I tell you, once you get to this stage and you are just knocking things off of the list left and right, it feels great. Okay? we're going to wrap up with action items from this webinar. Excuse me. First thing is make sure to start fleshing out your home stretch document with application deadlines and with your ideal end by date. That's an easy first step that anyone on this can go and do today. Next thing, identify where you currently are in the motivation cycle and create an anchor to help yourself recover and get back to that engaged place. And last, write down one experiment for this week to approach tasks with less stress. And remember the guideposts for that: communication, clarification, and empathy. Wonderful. Christine is going to introduce what we have up right now.
Yes, I am. I'm going to share this slide with you. We are so excited to share with you the next event that we are going to be doing, because it'll actually give you an opportunity to come hang out with us in person. We have put together this incredible workshop called Carve Your Own Path, and it's about helping students in high school, recently graduated, in college, even recent college graduates, carve their own path and create the life that they really want. And it's kind of a culmination of everything that we've been discussing in these Rock Your Senior Year seminars, how to really put it into use. It's really the combination of all of our expertise, something that we started discussing when we first came together as a collaboration to help young people make the most of their education and have fulfillment in their life, to be able to define what they want, what inspires them, to keep a constructive mindset, to know how to overcome obstacles, and just to offer our knowledge and our expertise and our experience about the tools and resources that can help a student clarify a plan that will help keep the motivation up, and to take some action toward it, to have some accountability for what they want. So this workshop we're offering absolutely for free, of course, at the Santa Monica Main Library. It's on November 14th, and we'll be talking and sharing resources. There will be some interactive experiences. There'll be some things to take home that will help you and your students use it in the future. So we really hope that you'll join us, and we'll be sending out some information about this on our mailing list, so make sure that you're signed up for that, because we also have, I don't know if you've been able to take a look yet, but we've started our free video series, which we'll be sharing some quick tips in videos that we'll email you. So make sure that you're on our list, and you'll be able to sign up if you're watching this either below the video, or you are already signed up if you've joined us live for this webinar. So we can't wait to offer you more amazing things. Let us know if you have a question about the workshop. We'll give you a reminder for that. And right now, we want to make sure to answer any questions that you have about this webinar that we did for you today. So we've had a few questions coming in. I'm thinking it would maybe be great for Nick to answer a question, just because he's gone into incredible detail. He always offers so much that you can really just leave the webinar and sit down and start making a list of the things that you can do to use what he shares. So I'm sure he wants to answer a question for you guys.
The first question that I got was how do you set an ideal end by deadline? How do you yeah, the final deadline. Okay, so the final deadline is really about coming from a place of when do I want to be finished with this? And for most people, because of the stress of it, they're going to say that they want to be finished as soon as humanly possible. So when I'm working with my students, since we have the benefit of really working out ahead of time, my goal is always getting them completely finished with everything by December 15th. I just think it's a really good rule of thumb. They get to enjoy all of winter break. They will probably have applied early to a bunch of schools, early action, if not maybe one early decision, but usually a lot of early action. So there's a good possibility that they will have decisions in their back pocket going into winter break, and they can really just sort of rest easy by the time that comes around. For students who just don't have that luxury, they've had too crazy of a semester, and they've really, had to put their academic and extracurricular efforts first to be able to stay on top of everything. It's really whatever you want. If you are unable to finish everything before January, because to my mind, the next best thing is making sure that you don't have to work on these applications when you go into second semester, like I mentioned before. But if you're going to go into January, keep in mind that you also don't want to give up your entire winter break to working on applications and continuing to stress about those all the way through. So under those circumstances, when I've helped do that sort of planning in the past, I will basically kind of cordon off about a week of winter break to make sure that students can have a little bit of time to really enjoy themselves. And I see kind of an additional question coming up from Sheila. Even with finals in mid-December, totally depends on your student. Again, mine really, I try to get people finished with all of the main essays and main writings by about this time. I mean, my students are finished with the primary essays for UC's, Common App, and all of the why us. They at least have kind of like a good working draft, and they're basically working on all of the supplemental prompts, just trying to shore those up, and they tend to be smaller piecemeal things. Students who are doing auditions and who have other supplemental parts to their applications have been working on those for a good long time. If you need to take a pause for those finals, that's totally fine. And you also need to take a pause maybe directly afterwards to have a little bit of time to rest, to celebrate the holidays, all of that. So have designated times over break to work, and then set that specific end time, hopefully maybe a little bit before the first of the year, kind of in that period before Christmas or between Christmas and New Year's, or before I would say January 15th, so you can really knock everything out before getting too deep into the semester, second semester craziness, and into fighting off the senioritis, like I said before. Okay. Either of you guys have a question you want to address?
I'll jump in, Nick. Thank you very much for that. This is Hayden Lee again. And I actually had a direct question from a student who's asking me about the motivation cycle and wanted me to share it again. So let me see if I can share that again. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see it because I was having technical difficulties. All right, there we go. So in the chat box, are you guys able to see? Yes? No? All right. Well, anyways, the question was, are there specific tools to just avoid resistance and disengaged? Oh, so I think Christine is sharing it. Anyways, so the answer to that, the question is, are there specific tools to avoid resistance and disengaged in that part of the motivation cycle? And that's a great question coming from a student. And actually, there are no tools to avoid resistance and disengaged, because most of the time, resistance and disengaged, part of the motivation cycle, comes from circumstances outside of yourself. So when you're going through this college application process, like I was saying, when you're writing these essays, or let's say need to ask a letter of recommendation, and it's to be conscious of how you feel when you're resistant to something, or how you feel when you don't want to do something, and it's not to avoid it, but it's to have the tools to recover. So that when I was talking about tools of the motivation cycle, it's not to avoid resistance and disengaged, it's having tools on learning how to get engaged faster. So I hope that makes sense for this student, is if you're currently, to be avoiding challenges in your life, it's having tools on how to overcome the challenges in your life. That's how to stay motivated, because it's impossible to avoid resistance, and it's impossible to avoid once in a while we get a little bit in a slump, but it's learning how to recover faster, which builds resiliency. So which is actually, the college application process is such a great way for students to learn to build resiliency, and it's being aware of how you feel in each part of the cycle, being aware of when something hard is coming up, but also being aware of how you can overcome it in order to move closer to your goals. So I hope that makes sense. There are no tools to avoid resistance and disengage. There's only tools on how to recover to get out of those stages faster. Okay? So, oops, and let me have I think we have a question for Christine.
Yeah, thanks, Hayden. I'll answer this one. Well, let's see. So it looks like there's a student. What do I do to help my student who gets very stressed and doesn't want help? Okay, so a student that doesn't really want help. Totally get that question. You can feel really stuck, not knowing what to do. So sometimes it helps to know the reason why, which you can't know for sure, but a lot of the time students reject help because they want to feel like they can do things on their own, or maybe they're feeling nagged about things and they kind of reject that, and so they don't actually get a lot done, or maybe they've just been practicing some bad habits. So, I mean, when I say that, I mean bad habits with stress management. So they're not really ready to face what they need to do, or maybe it's more that they expect everything to be perfect, and then they're sort of procrastinating because it doesn't seem like they'll be able to make it perfect. That sometimes happens with some of the students that I work with, because I tend to work with students with some version of sort of stress or anxiety. So first, I would really recommend, I'm all about this communication stuff, just observe your own habits. So if your student's stress triggers your stress as a parent, then you aren't helping when you try to talk to your student about what needs to be done, because it's often mistaken, as I mentioned, with empathy to stress, and let that trigger you. So if you get to know your own stress and you practice how you want to communicate with your student, so that might be bringing things up at a planned time rather than letting your own stress build up, that can make a big difference for your interaction with your student. That actually can help your student change some habits. But of course, even though all of that's important, I definitely want to respond if you're more concerned, especially in the short term, about the level of worry. When you say doesn't want help, so your student's really stressed, maybe they're panicking about things, or you are concerned with the level of negativity that you're noticing. So you can help empower your student to make some changes and find some help from a mentor or a therapist who has knowledge about stress or teens, or someone who can help just get your student organized with everything that needs to be done so that it doesn't seem so overwhelming, so that it actually seems possible that some help might even work. And then that can sort of help maybe change things too in your student's environment, or things at home or at school, and just start getting some positive change happening if you get some support and help, that it's not just you and your student battling it out all the time. Because teenagers can really get quickly trapped in some negative habits. So attending to those things early on, really, it doesn't just prevent things from getting more serious, but it also helps your student really flourish in a new way. So hopefully that answers. If they don't want help, like, try to connect with them with it first, but then don't be afraid to get some outside help and support. It makes sense that a student might respond to someone else that's kind of an expert in helping them get organized, or helping them work on some tools for stress, because there's not that pressure of the day-to-day with that person. They can really focus and actually see some more quick results, and that's really empowering for a student. So hopefully that helps. I'm not sure if I see another question. Maybe someone sent one to Nick or to Hayden. Do you have another one that either of you want to answer? And feel free to email us questions as well later on. And we will have this replay up for a couple of days if you want to take a look through and then see if you have a question. But I think looks like we're going to wrap it up. I didn't hear from you that there were other questions coming up. So again, make sure, I'm going to show you this one more time, because I'm really excited for this event. I'm just going to put up, hello, I'm just going to put up my flyer really quickly so that everybody can see that. And we're excited to see you at our workshop. Let us know if you have questions about that. Thank you so much for your engagement today. I think everybody almost participated in the polls, so thank you for doing that, and we hope that it's useful. And we will see you at our Carve Your Own Path event. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, so much. And I just wanted to point out our last webinar of the year. I'm not sure if we mentioned that, of this calendar year. So we are very excited to have you join us for our live workshop, and we will be in touch with some lots here. So thank you so much for being a part of this, and we will talk to you. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.